All right. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. All right.
Trickster. Always excited to see you. You want a candy bar? Here. I got another one.
Oh, I wish I could, but I don't want to break the law.
What do you mean? It's not illegal for you to eat candy.
But my mom said.
Oh, yeah.
Can I take this?
Rick. What? The president outlawed candy for kids under 10.
You lied to me? My own mother lied to me?
Rick, here's the thing.
Do you know how many letters I wrote to the president? He probably thinks I'm crazy. Crazy. Wait, you lied, but your hair didn't fall out. Is that a lie too?
Join the club. She once told me kids who talk during Wheel of Fortune go blind.
Rick, come on. I'm sorry.
Mom, you said you'd try me a babysitter. She says a lot of things.
Oh. Wow. This is like 3 days in a row we've talked about lying and stuff, isn't it? All right. Let's have Rachel. Can you read this to us?
There is nothing hidden that will not become visible, and nothing secret that will not be known and complained.
Good. So we got some practical advice, okay? First of all, we all know it's wrong to lie anyway, right? But here's some reason why you shouldn't do it, even if maybe you don't think it's wrong. Maybe your moral compass is a little skewed, okay? This shows you that, you know what? If you lie to people, guess what? Eventually it's going to come out, okay? All right, good. Beagle, you good with that? All right, awesome. You want to do our prayer then? Okay. Amen. Thank you, ma'am. All right, so Grant, we've got tax increases in order to pay for these things. You said that is contractionary. But if the government helps pay your mortgage and your unemployment and all that, it's expansionary. Very good. All right, cool. So today, guys, we're going to finish up fiscal policy after our quiz. Okay, we got a couple little things to talk about, just very minor little things. You're going to take this major quiz, and then next class you have a test. And so I've already uploaded the practice test, so it'll give you an idea of what to expect, what kind of multiple choice questions. Next. Okay, just a couple of little nuance type things I just want to express to you guys, okay? Because sometimes you'll be asked questions. I don't want them to be things that throw you for a loop, okay? Also, I want to point out that words mean what they say. Okay? So, for example, is borrowing or printing money more expansionary when we're trying to finance deficits? So the word expansionary means what, Christine? Yeah, so which one of these two methods of financing a deficit is going to be more expansionary? You can answer that. You go ahead. Okay? If you borrow money, it leads to higher interest rates, which depresses a little bit of the expansionary effect, right? All right. So the answer here, if it's solely what's more expansionary, it's going to be printing money. Now, that doesn't say that's the best way to do it, okay? Because they both have pros and cons, okay? Government borrows money, interest rates rise, it's not going to be as expansionary, okay? That's what decreases the multiplier. Printing the money is more expansionary, but the con on that is that it leads to inflation, okay? So just read the words, and if the word says expansionary, that's not asking you to make a judgment if it's good or bad. It's saying which one makes the aggregate demand curve shift more to the right, okay? Everybody cool with that? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. No. It just because it doesn't include any kind of crowding out effect. It doesn't raise interest rates. Okay, Addison? Yes, they do. Yes. No. Nope. All right, everybody good? This actually explains why we don't have high interest rates today, even though the government's borrowed more than they ever have. Okay, in the last 6 years, our national debt has doubled, so interest rates are still the lowest they've ever been, though. So this explains it. Okay, printing money. All right. Oh, long-run money supply. Sorry, this is what we're going to cover after our test. So we're going to start looking at money, as far as using money, the Fed, to influence economic decisions. Okay. All right. Cool. What about surpluses? Okay. Should we hold surpluses or give them back? What that means is, should the government hold on to them and just save it, put it under their mattress, or should they give the surpluses back to the taxpayers in time of in time of inflation, when we're using contractionary policy? What do y'all think? Which would be more contractionary? I guess. Okay, if you give it back, it'd be more contractionary. Holding it would be, yeah. Because when you give it, if you give it back in the form of tax cuts, guess what you do with it? You spend it, and so it could create more inflation. So these are just subtleties of. I'm just saying it would be more contractionary if it's held, if the government holds it. I'm not saying you should. Yeah. So if we're trying to solve inflation now, and we end up with surpluses as far as the government goes, they could either give that surplus back to the taxpayers, or they could hold it until they need it. Okay? If they just hold it and it doesn't get spent, then it's not going to be expansionary. It's going to hold the contractionary forces down. If they give it back to you, though, yeah, we all know you're going to spend it, right? Yeah, I would too. All right, so there's two other things you could do. We could retire the debt with it, but that would lower interest rates, which would be expansionary. So if we're trying to solve inflation, this counteracts it. If we hold on to it, impounding the surplus, then it would be more contractionary. So these are just subtleties. These are just, maybe you might see a really, really hard test question that asks you something like that, and you're like, this is really hard. Okay? But that's okay. You'll be okay. We do? Okay. Whoops. We'll watch it then. It's another way to dispose of debts.
Financing estimated $11 trillion. The White House announced an emergency economic plan today, treating the national.
Oh no, we already saw this one. Never mind. I thought it was a different one. Yeah, we have. We've seen it. It was cashforgold.com. We've seen that one. All right. So now we have two more things. Okay. Now we're going to look at the two political parties. Okay. We've got Democrats, who you could call progressive or liberal, and then we've got Republicans, who you can call conservative or even libertarian, or at least those tendencies. Okay. And so those two philosophies are going to treat fiscal policy differently. Okay. And so the big difference is a big G or a little g. Okay. When I say G, what am I talking about? Yeah, so one of them would like to see more government involvement or a bigger government. The other one would like to see smaller. So the philosophies look like this. Okay, on the liberal side or the progressive side, during a recession, they would say increase government spending. Okay, and then during inflation, they would say increase taxes. Okay, so either one of these or neither one of these methods will make government smaller, right? So we still have the big G. On the conservative side, or libertarian even, in a recession, they would say decrease taxes. But if there's inflation, they would say decrease government spending. Okay? Everybody cool with that? So the net effect on this side of it would be smaller government. Quinceañera? Okay. This side subscribes more to Keynesian than this side would. Keynesian is government or taxes, either one. Okay. The difference, though, is that this side here, okay, they want to see the government get bigger, and so for the government to get bigger, you have to get more taxes or more spending, or both, right? These guys would prefer a smaller government, so in a recession they would decrease taxes. It gives the spending power to the people. And in times of inflation, they would say decrease the government spending. Yeah. Yep. All right. Diana's getting hypnotized. I can see her. Okay, you're not. All right. Who? Question, Alex. No, you'd raise taxes with inflation. So the two parties, to fix the inflation, these guys want to increase the taxes. These guys want to decrease the government spending. Okay? Either one of these work with inflation. Yeah. Yeah, they both work. The net effect, though, is that one wants a bigger G, one wants a smaller G. Yeah, it's just different ways. So that's why you have the two opposed philosophies. All right. Are y'all good? Why don't you do both? All right. Well, try to get a Democrat to decrease the size of government and see if that ever works. I'm just saying, it's just the two different ways, that's all, okay? All right, now let's talk about some other issues with fiscal policy, okay? We talked about how the multiplier effect isn't as robust as it would be predicted, through theory because of the crowding out effect, because of the net export effect. But we also have these. We've got the lag effect, okay? So if you go back to Unit 3, we learned about the business cycle. The average recession's 11 months, right? So yeah, okay? We've also talked about the data lag. Okay, we just got the second quarter GDP numbers. Oh, how long is that? Yeah, today. Or was it third? No, it wasn't third. Couldn't be. Yeah, maybe it was third. It's a month late. Okay, so a month late, we get our third quarter GDP. In order to know you're in a recession, it has to be 2 quarters, right? So you're going to be, by the time a recession starts, and by the time you know you're in it, it could be 7 or 8 months. Everybody agree with that? Okay, so there's a data lag. But before we know we need to use fiscal policy, the recession could be 8 months in. Okay? Then, because a recession is on average 11 months, it could very well be that the recession will be over in a couple months. So there's this wait and see lag. Okay? Then, if they decide they do want to do something, there's a legislative lag. Okay? To pass a bill and have the president sign it, it takes a very long time. Okay? And then there's the effect lag. Okay? Y'all may not be aware of this, but in 2009, with the $1 trillion stimulus, they actually hadn't had the whole thing spent after 2 years. So if the average recession's 11 months and it takes you 8 months to know you're in it, a couple months to see if you really want to do something, and then another month to implement something, and then years for it to take effect, what's the point? See, so that's a big criticism of fiscal policy. Okay? In fact, a lot of people complain about it because it ends up exacerbating your peak and your recession. Makes it worse. Okay? So there's some more criticism. Are you all good with that? Okay. So let's move on ahead. Yes, sir. Well, like for example, so at A, the recession starts, right? Okay. And then at B, we get probably our first GDP report where we know that the first quarter was negative. By the time we get to C, maybe we now know that the second quarter was negative. And by the time we actually implement something, we're at D, and the recession's over. But we end up implementing it anyway, and we end up making our economy grow too fast so that we end up at F, and then the next recession it's a harder, faster fall. Because to do nothing means, like, I'll give you a great example. In 1990-91, we had a recession. And George H.W. Bush did nothing. Well, a year and a half later, he was kicked out of office. So, yeah, I mean, people are like, hey, he didn't do anything. He doesn't care. Right. It's a... Well, think of it like this. Have you ever babysat? Okay. Well, with my kids were horrible, horrible criers. Like, they didn't want to go to bed. They would just cry for hours. Okay? Did all that crying do them any good? No, but we would go in there, we'd hold them, whatever. Oh. and then try to put them back to bed. Okay? Same thing here. I mean, the electorate sometimes will cry and moan and say, hey, you got to do something. I want it now. Okay? And so the politicians give it to them because their interest is basically getting elected. And so they're going to give it to them, and so this is just what happens. Yeah. So anyway, hey, Rachel, what's up? What arrows? Oh, these over here? Oh, I'm just demonstrating that when we try to fix the economy, we're moving those curves. That's all. It's not hugely important. Okay? I'm just trying to get across that there's another criticism of fiscal policy. Okay? We're going to end up, when we look at monetary policy, we're going to see that it doesn't have a lot of the same problems. And so it's more used. Okay? It's not necessarily better, but it's more used. Okay? All right, so now we've got a third criticism. Okay? So we got the crowding out effect, we've got the lag effect, but now we've got kind of a third thing, because sometimes the economy, if you try to fix it in a traditional Keynesian way, it's not really going to work. It's going to make it worse. Okay, so Fez, how are you going to fix this economy? We have 10% unemployment. What are you going to do? Oh, okay, you're fixing it right. All right, never mind. I thought you were going to screw this up. Okay, here's what I thought he was going to say. All right, this is a recession. We need to increase spending. Boom. Okay? The problem there is that we have really, really high inflation still. So then I thought he was going to fix inflation, and so he's going to decrease government spending. And that makes the recession lower, but the unemployment worse. So that's what I thought you were going to do. So now tell us what you really did, because that's really, really good. Yeah, decrease government regulation. Okay, so I'm going to pay you for this. Tell them how that works. Okay. So basically, you're going to say, you know what, instead of using this Keynesian system, let's do something that's going to affect the aggregate supply curve. And so you fix it like that. Okay. Yeah, that's what Fez just did. He decreased government regulation to make it easier to do business, and so it shifted the AS curve to the right. Good job. Anyway, what this is called is supply side economics. Okay, so that's our like, it's sort of like a fiscal policy. It's using government intervention, but it's doing it in a way that affects the supply curve instead of the demand curve. Okay, so it came about in late 70s, because in the late 70s we had an aggregate supply curve that shifted to the left, like it did here, as a result of higher oil prices. Okay, and so the traditional Keynesian ways didn't work. Okay, they tried it, it didn't work. So this guy here, Arthur Laffer, he was Ronald Reagan's economic advisor. He said, here's what you need to do. You need to shift the aggregate supply curve to the right. Okay, this all's kind of going over his head, of course. But he said, here's how you do it. So specific deregulation, okay? He said that if you accelerate depreciation, now this is more like accounting, but businesses, when they buy a new computer system, for example, okay, what they'll do is they'll figure, okay, this computer system is going to have a life of 5 years. So the tax code says that the business can then deduct 1/5 of the cost of this computer system every year from their taxes. Does that make sense? Okay, Arthur Laffer said, you know what, instead of doing it like that, let's let them deduct the whole thing in the first year. So the incentive was that it would increase capital formation. Everybody cool with that? Okay. Then he said, let's also reduce corporate taxes. So doing that is going to shift actually both curves. Okay, but when you reduce corporate taxes, it allows them to then also continue to buy more capital. Okay. Reduce individual income taxes by $250 billion. That also is going to shift the AD curve, but the idea here was that if more people had additional money, they would then invest it. Okay, about this time we had the big 401k boom. Okay, lots and lots of money is going into the stock market. That provides more capital. And then tax credits for research and development. So more tax incentives to get companies to do research and development, which does what to technology? Advances it. Okay? So the whole idea here is moving the PPC outward, which is the same thing as moving the aggregate supply curve to the right. So everybody follow it? Okay. So that's how you fix stagflation. Okay. So real quick, we got another curve. This is not one you're going to have to draw. I just want you to understand it. Okay. So Arthur Laffer created this. He basically said, at some point in time, there's a way to maximize tax revenue. Okay. And it has to do with the tax rate. So the tax rate, or tax revenue, is a function of the tax rate. And you guys, if you're in calculus, you know that there's maximum points, and you know how to calculate it. You know, set everything equals 0, whatever. Okay? So let's just think of this in common sense terms for a second. If the tax rate on your income is 0, how much money does the government receive? $0. Good. If the tax rate on us is 100%, how much money does the government receive? Think about it for a second. None of it. Why? It's okay. Say it. You can say it. Yeah, you can. I'll ask you a question that will put it in words for you. If you knew that going to work, you're not going to get to receive anything, are you going to go to work? So no income would ever be earned. So the point he said is that if tax rates are really, really high, you're not going to get a lot of government revenue. If they're really, really low, you're not going to get a lot of revenue. He said there's a maximizing point. We need to find out where it is. Okay? So basically, the higher the tax rate goes, the more revenue you're going to get until you hit a point. Okay? Whatever point that is. And then if tax rates are still higher than that, government revenue is actually going to go down because it disincentivizes work. Okay? Does that make sense, guys? All right, so the tax rate when all of this started happening was 52%. Okay, so the highest tax rate was 52%. The highest tax rate was lowered to 28%. What do you think happened to revenue? Did it go up or down? It actually went up. Okay, so we know that 52% was probably over here somewhere. Okay, not very much revenue. We don't know where it was over here, but it's probably over here. We know that 28% was going to be somewhere more, in this range, somewhere around here. We just don't know where. Okay? It could be that the maximizing rate's 35%. It might even be 20%. Nobody really knows because you'd have to experiment to find out. But we did find out that 52% is actually going to decrease government revenue. Okay?
Anyone know what this is?
Remember this movie?
Anyone seen this before?
He was actually talking about all this stuff. Okay. Anyway, Ben Stein, if y'all know him, he's actually an economist. Kind of interesting. He went to Columbia University, got his degree in economics, and then Yale Law School. So he's a pretty smart guy. Anyway, Ronald Reagan kind of related to this because the only reason the tax rate was 52% when he took office is because John F. Kennedy lowered it to 52%. It used to be 90%. Okay? And so Reagan said that when he was an actor, by the time he made 4 movies, if he made a 5th one, he would only get to keep 10% of what he earned. So he didn't make more than 4 movies a year. Okay? So this rang true to him. And so a lot of people would be like that. Okay? The more you make, once you make that X dollar, they're going to take 90% of it, so it's not going to work anymore. Okay? So the point of this is that it emphasized special kind of tax cuts. Okay? It was the kind of tax cut that would unleash investment. Okay? So one of the words given to this was trickle-down economics. Have y'all heard of that? Okay? They basically said, let's give tax cuts that focus more on the rich. Okay? And so this is why it's kind of demonized, right? If you give rich people tax cuts, the common perception is that they're just going to be greedy and do something with it just for themselves. But in reality, what ended up happening is that people would put it in savings, they would put it in the stock market, they would open businesses, okay, they would do all kinds of things like that. Okay, and so it increased investment in the country, it increased our capital stock, which creates long-run growth. Okay, so it increased saving and investment. It gave people a better incentive to work harder, okay? And it gave people incentive to take risks, If you got more money, you know, maybe you'll open up a restaurant or something. Okay? You all good on that? Okay. Again, this is supply side fiscal policy. It's still Keynesian because you're using the government and you're using tax policy to make something happen. It's just not focusing on the aggregate demand curve. It's focusing on the aggregate supply curve. Good? All right. So basically it would look like this, okay? It's designed to move the aggregate supply curve, but it'll move both curves, okay? Because if we get tax cuts, we're going to spend it, okay? Businesses are going to buy capital equipment. The increase in capital moves the AD curve, but then the additional capital is going to move the AS curve as well. And so we just got more growth quicker, basically. All right, couple more things just to get through, okay? There's some vocabulary type stuff, okay? We need to look at some legislation and know what they are, know what it means. Okay, we've got the Employment Act of 1946. This basically legitimized Keynesian economic policy. And then we also have the Council of Economic Advisors. Those guys advise the president on economic matters. And then we've got the